Listen, there are moments in life when the universe speaks to you in a language most people never learn to hear. A single mother was about to discover that language through the most unlikely messenger. Sarah had lost everything that mattered. Her husband didn't come home from the river 5 years ago, not the way she needed him to. The current took him on an ordinary Tuesday in spring, and it left her with a son who stopped speaking for months. Little James was 8 years old when the river stole his father. He was 13 when Sarah made the decision that would change everything. On that morning, Sarah wasn't thinking about saving a horse. She was thinking about saving her son. James had become a ghost in their own house. He wouldn't play. He wouldn't laugh. He'd spend hours in his room, staring at nothing, and Sarah could feel the weight of his grief pressing down on him like a stone that kept getting heavier. The grief counselor said, "Time heals all wounds." The school therapist said he needed outlets. His grandmother said he just needed to get over it. But Sarah knew better. She knew her son was drowning in a different way than his father had, and she was terrified she was losing him to the same dark water. That's when she heard about the horse. Every small town has a place where broken things end up. In theirs, it was old Miller's property at the edge of Route 9, a sprawling pasture where rescue horses were kept, most of them too damaged or too old to sell. Sarah had driven past it 1,000 times. She'd never stopped. But on that particular afternoon, something made her turn the wheel. The gelding was standing alone in the far corner of the pasture, and even from a distance, Sarah could see he was different. His coat was dull and patchy. One eye was gone, scarred over completely, leaving only a hollow shadow where it should have been. He was thin in a way that spoke of hunger that went deeper than empty stomachs. He was the kind of broken that most people look away from. Sarah didn't look away. She walked toward him slowly, and when she got close enough, the horse didn't rear or pull back. He just watched her with his single eye, and in that moment, something passed between them. A recognition, maybe. Two broken creatures who understood exactly what it felt like to survive when surviving seemed pointless. "How much for him?" she asked Miller, who'd followed her out to the field. Miller laughed, a rough, surprised sound. "He's not for sale, lady. That horse is a liability. Got trauma written all over him. Dangerous if you don't know what you're doing." But Sarah was already making up her mind. And if you want the full truth to come out, hit like so. This story reaches the people who need to hear it. The town of Riverside had always been the kind of place where everyone knew your business and cared deeply about reminding you of it. Population 3847. The kind of town where the grocery store clerk knew what brand of coffee your mother preferred, where the pastor could tell you the exact date of your last missed sermon, where sympathy lasted exactly as long as the casserole stayed warm. When Thomas drowned, the casseroles came. For weeks, the kitchen counter overflowed with tuna and green bean and potato salads wrapped in plastic wrap. Neighbors stopped by with their voices pitched low and their eyes heavy with practiced concern. Sarah received hugs that felt like obligations. People told her he was in a better place. People told her God had a plan. People told her that children were resilient, that James would bounce back, that time would heal. What they didn't tell her was how to watch her only child fade into himself day after day. The truth was that after Thomas died, Sarah had to become two people. She had to be the grieving widow, the role the town had written for her. And she also had to be strong enough to hold her son together while he fell apart. She had to smile at the grocery store and pretend everything was manageable. She had to nod when people said she was doing so well. She had to perform recovery while her heart was still bleeding. She worked 2 jobs, a receptionist's position at the dental office downtown, where she answered phones and scheduled cleanings and kept her tears for the bathroom breaks. And 3 evenings a week, she cleaned offices in the business complex, pushing a vacuum cleaner through empty rooms while James sat in the lobby doing homework or playing on his phone. It wasn't much money. It was barely survival. Their house was small, a 3-bedroom ranch on the edge of town that Thomas's life insurance had managed to keep them in. Though the payments were tight and the roof needed work and the fence was leaning against the wind like it was tired of standing. The yard had gone wild over the years. Sarah didn't have the energy to maintain it, and James didn't have the will. The boy had changed in ways that terrified her more than any financial worry. He'd been a cheerful kid before, the kind who asked questions about everything, who made jokes at the dinner table, who wanted to know how things worked. The river had drowned all of that. In its place was a careful, measured version of James who moved through the world like he was trying not to take up too much space. He got good grades, too good, like he was trying to punish himself with perfection. He had no real friends. He declined invitations. He seemed to be waiting for something, though Sarah could never figure out what. And the water terrified him. He wouldn't go near the creek that ran through their property, though he'd loved it before. He wouldn't swim at the community pool. He refused to take baths and would shower only under running water so fast it was barely a wash. When it rained hard, Sarah would hear him awake in his room, listening to the storm like it was a personal threat. The school counselor had recommended therapy. The pediatrician had suggested they might want to consider medication. Sarah's mother had implied, very gently, very carefully, that maybe a boy needed a male influence, a man, to help him process this kind of loss. Sarah had nodded and listened and thanked them all, and then she'd gone home and sat alone in the kitchen after James was asleep, wondering if she was failing her son by not being enough, wondering if the very fact of her being a woman meant she couldn't help him cross this bridge, wondering if she was watching her child disappear and doing nothing substantial enough to stop it. That was the state of things when she heard about the horse. Old Miller had owned his rescue property for 30 years. The locals called it Miller's Graveyard, though not to his face. It was where horses went when they were too old to race, too damaged to ride, too broken to sell. Miller kept them alive as long as he could, but it was a labor of love and poverty combined. The man was in his 70s, running the place mostly alone, unable to afford much besides hay and basic care. The gelding had arrived 6 months earlier, no one knew from where. Some horses came with a history. This one had come with mystery. He was maybe 8 or 9 years old, but he looked ancient. A gelding, bay-colored underneath the neglect, with that one eye missing and permanent scars along his ribs that looked like he'd been through something no animal should survive. Miller said the horse was too aggressive to handle, that something in him had broken beyond repair, that he'd reared on the vet and bitten a volunteer and refused to let anyone clean his stalls. He said it kindly, but he said it like a warning. Sarah didn't hear it as a warning. She heard it as recognition. She thought about her son, about the walls he'd built, about the way he flinched sometimes when people moved too quickly around him. She thought about how grief could make you dangerous, how trauma could teach you not to trust, how sometimes the most wounded creatures were the ones people were most afraid of. And she thought, maybe they needed each other. But none of them knew what was already moving beneath the surface. None of them understood that rescue horses and traumatized children sometimes come together for reasons that have nothing to do with luck. The first time Sarah brought the gelding home, she didn't tell James. She wanted to see if the sight of him would wake something in her son, some spark of curiosity or interest that had been buried too deep to reach. She'd made arrangements with Miller on a Thursday after work. A trailer had pulled up to their property on a Friday afternoon, and with Miller's help, they'd led the horse into the small pasture behind their house. It wasn't much, just a quarter-acre enclosed by a weathered fence, but it was space. It was home. Sarah had left the horse there to settle while she stood at the kitchen window, watching him move slowly, carefully, as if every step hurt. He explored the perimeter of the fence, his single eye taking in the boundaries, processing the confined space. Then he walked to the far corner and just stood there, facing away from the house, not moving. It was the posture of someone who'd given up on the world, Sarah recognized it intimately. When James came home from school, he noticed her at the window immediately. Her hand was pressed against the glass, and her face held an expression he hadn't seen in years, something like hope. "Mom?" His voice was cautious. "What's wrong?" "Come here," she said, and gestured him over. He obeyed, the way he always did, moving like he was walking through water. And then he saw the horse, and every muscle in his body went rigid. "What is that?" His voice was small and frightened. "That," Sarah said carefully, "is home. He's home now. He's going to stay with us for a while." James didn't respond. He stared at the horse like it might be dangerous, like it might be a trick. And maybe, in his 13-year-old mind, it felt that way. A surprise. An intrusion. Something his mother had done without asking him first. "I don't want him here," James said quietly, and then he left the room. But over the next few days, something shifted. James didn't explicitly go out to see the horse, but Sarah noticed him at the window more often. Just looking. She'd catch him standing in the kitchen doorway or at his bedroom window, watching the gelding move slowly around the pasture. The horse had a routine, she realized. He'd stand in the corner in the morning. He'd move to the water trough around noon. He'd spend the afternoon facing the tree line, as if he was looking for something he'd lost. On the third day, Sarah found James on the back porch steps, sitting quietly about 15 feet from the fence. He wasn't trying to approach the horse. He was just watching. And the horse, remarkably, was watching him back. "What's his name?" James asked, not turning around. "He doesn't have one yet," Sarah said from the doorway. "I thought maybe you could help me choose one." James was quiet for a long time. "He looks sad," he finally said. "Yeah," Sarah agreed. "I think he's had a hard time." "How'd he lose his eye?" Sarah didn't know the real answer, but she said, "Something hurt him. Something that was too big to fight. So he survived it the best way he could. He's still here. He's still alive. That makes him stronger than most creatures I know." James didn't respond, but he stayed on the porch steps for another hour, just watching the horse. And Sarah, watching her son from inside, felt the smallest shift in the weight of his grief. It was barely perceptible, but it was there. They named him Sentinel, not because of any grand reason, but because that's what he did. He stood. He watched. He held his ground. And slowly, incrementally, James began to do the same. By the second week, James started taking his homework outside. He'd sit on the porch steps with his textbooks and notebooks, and he'd work while Sentinel grazed or stood at the fence. It wasn't interaction exactly, but it was presence. It was proximity. It was a step towards something. Sarah bought grain and apple treats. She left them on the porch, and sometimes, though not every time, James would take them out to the fence and set them in Sentinel's feeding trough. The horse would approach after James had retreated to a safe distance, and he'd eat methodically, carefully, like even food might be a threat. But he kept coming back. On the 21st day, something happened that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. James had gone out to refill the water trough as he'd started doing every morning. It was a task Sarah had suggested, a small responsibility, a way to give him a reason to be near the horse. And Sentinel, who'd maintained a careful distance from the boy since he'd arrived, suddenly approached. Not threatening, not aggressive. He just walked forward until he was only a few feet from James, and then he lowered his head. Sarah, watching from the kitchen window, felt her eyes fill with tears. She saw her son's hand come up slowly, so slowly, and touch the horse's neck. Just a brief contact. Just fingertips against hair and muscle. But it was the first time in 5 years that she'd seen him reach out towards something living without fear in his face. If you believe she deserved justice after what happened, comment "justice" below. The news that Sarah had brought a horse to the property reached town faster than lightning finds ground. By Sunday service, half the congregation knew about it. By Monday afternoon, Sarah's phone had rung 3 times with variations of the same concerned call. Was she sure this was safe? Didn't she know horses could be unpredictable? Had she considered what this might do to James? The implication was clear. What kind of mother brings home a wild, damaged animal for a grieving child? Sarah had learned to ignore the town's opinions, but not everyone ignored it as effectively. On a Tuesday evening, as Sarah was preparing dinner, she heard shouting from the back of the house. She dropped the wooden spoon and ran outside to find James standing at the fence, his face flushed red with anger, his fists clenched. Standing on the other side of the fence was Derek Hartwell, the town's deputy sheriff, and with him was Thomas's brother, Uncle Michael. "James!" Sarah moved quickly toward them. "What's happening?" Michael turned to her with that expression she'd come to dread, the one that said he was about to deliver news in the guise of family concern. "This horse is dangerous, Sarah. He's got a violent history. Derek was just telling me. This animal has bitten people. He's reared. There's a liability issue here. If James gets hurt, it's on you." "How do you even know about the horse?" Sarah asked, already knowing the answer. The town had been watching. The town had been talking. "I got a call from Miller," Derek said, his voice almost apologetic. "He mentioned you'd taken the animal, and I thought someone should check in, make sure everything was secure. Horses like this, they're unpredictable." What he meant was, a single mother raising a sensitive child has no business making decisions about dangerous animals. What he meant was, you're not enough. You never were. James was crying now, silent tears running down his face as he held the fence. "He's not dangerous. He's just scared. Just like..." Gee, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Everyone knew what he meant. "Just like me." "Listen," Michael said, and his voice had taken on that particular tone that people use when they're about to say something they've convinced themselves is for everyone's own good. "We were talking, and Derek and we think it might be better if James came to stay with me for a while, just to give you some space to figure this situation out. I have the yard. I have the time. I have the experience with horses, and..." "No." Sarah's voice cut through the evening like a knife. "Absolutely not. Sarah, be reasonable. I'm being completely reasonable. This is my house. This is my son. And this horse stays." Derek and Michael exchanged a look. That particular look that men exchange when they're faced with a woman who isn't behaving in the way they've decided she should. The look that said they would try another approach later. The look that said this wasn't over. After they left, Sarah brought James inside, and she sat with him on the couch while he cried in a way he hadn't cried in months. Big, heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep and true. She held him and let him break. And when he finally quieted, he said something that changed everything. "Dad wouldn't have liked them either," he whispered. "Dad always said Uncle Michael was always trying to take charge of everything. Dad always said I had to learn to trust myself more than anybody else's opinions." Sarah froze. It was the first time in 5 years that James had brought up his father in any context other than the circumstances of his death. It was the first time he'd spoken a memory instead of avoiding the name completely. "Your father was right," Sarah said quietly, "and he would have loved that you're learning that." That night, after James was asleep, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and did something she'd been too afraid to do before. She searched for information about Sentinel, not the name, the horse's actual history. What she found took her breath away. Sentinel's original owner had been a ranch in 3 counties over, and the horse had been used in high-level equestrian competition for years. He'd been successful, decorated, praised. And then, at age 5, something had happened. There was a fire. The barn had burned. Sentinel had been rescued, but not before suffering severe trauma and injuries. The fire had taken his eye. It had left him fractured. But what Sarah found in the articles and the Rescue Network posts was something more important than the trauma. There were testimonies. The woman who'd rescued him from the fire said that in the chaos and confusion, Sentinel had stayed close to the other animals, guiding them away from the flames. The stable manager said he'd always had an instinct for people, that he could read emotional states and respond with a kind of protective presence that was unusual for a horse. There was a quote from a former trainer: "This horse has an almost supernatural ability to sense when someone needs protection. He's bonded to emotionally vulnerable people in a way I've never seen in another horse. When he's attached himself to someone, he stays vigilant. He watches. He protects." Sarah read those words 3 times, and then she understood. Sentinel hadn't been brought to their home by chance. Somewhere in whatever consciousness moves through creatures, he'd recognized James. He'd seen the boy drowning in his own way, and he'd answered that call. But the most dangerous truth hadn't been spoken yet. That was the morning everything began to change in a different way. Sarah started taking Sentinel seriously as part of James's recovery. She read about trauma-informed horsemanship. She watched videos on YouTube. She contacted a therapist who specialized in equine therapy and paid far more than she could afford for a single consultation. But the woman gave her a framework, a way of understanding what was happening between her son and the horse. What she learned was that horses, in their silent way, are teachers. They don't judge. They don't carry expectations. They respond to authenticity and presence. And for a traumatized child, a traumatized horse can become a bridge between isolation and connection. So Sarah built a structure around it. 3 days a week, after school, James would go out to work with Sentinel. Not riding, that would come later, or maybe never, and that was okay. But grooming, feeding, learning to read the horse's body language and respond accordingly, walking him around the yard, just being present with him in a way that required intention and vulnerability. The first few weeks were slow. Sentinel didn't trust easily. He'd rear if James moved too quickly. He'd move away if the boy approached from his blind side. He'd test every boundary, every interaction, like he was checking to see if James would abandon him the way everyone else had. But James, in his methodical, grief-hollowed way, kept showing up. He learned to move slowly. He learned to speak softly. He learned to understand that Sentinel's skittishness wasn't rejection. It was self-protection, just like his own withdrawn silence had been. And in learning to work with Sentinel's trauma, James began to work with his own. Sarah watched her son change from a distance she was careful to maintain. She didn't push. She didn't interfere. But she noticed things. The way he stood straighter. The way his hands moved with more confidence. The way he'd started to smile again. Small smiles. Tentative smiles. But smiles nonetheless. The town didn't stop watching. If anything, the watching intensified. Michael called regularly with concerned questions. Was James getting his schoolwork done? Was he getting enough social interaction with people? Was one horse really enough enrichment for a boy who'd experienced such trauma? The underlying message: shouldn't this be handled by professionals, not a mother playing therapist? Derek stopped by the property one afternoon, officially checking on horse welfare, though it was clear it was something else. Sarah felt the weight of it, the subtle threat underneath the friendly smile. If this isn't working, there are people who care. If you're making mistakes, people will notice. If anything happens to James, this is already documented. But something had shifted in Sarah by then. She'd stopped waiting for permission to be enough. She'd stopped needing the town's approval. She'd gotten her son back. Not all the way, not completely, but enough to know that what they were doing was working. By the 8th week, James had started talking about riding. "I don't think I'm ready," he said carefully, standing beside Sentinel's neck one afternoon, his hand resting on the horse's withers. "But maybe, and Sentinel will tell us if he's ready too." That was the promise she made, and that was the framework she held. But then the weather turned. Late autumn came with storms. Heavy, sudden storms that had the town preparing for flooding. The creek that ran through their property, which had been a peaceful trickle through the dry months, began to surge with purpose. The rain came in sheets. The water rose. And James, watching the water mount, began to panic. His old fears resurfaced. The water was returning. The water was hunting. The water had taken his father, and now it was coming for him. He stopped going out to see Sentinel. He refused to leave the house. He started having nightmares again. The first ones Sarah had heard him cry through in months. Sarah called the equine therapist back, and the woman was kind but clear. Sometimes trauma healing isn't linear. Sometimes the world triggers old responses. Sometimes you have to sit with the fear and let it pass, rather than trying to skip over it. On the third night of the storms, James refused to sleep in his bedroom. He was terrified the water would come through the walls. He sat with Sarah in the living room, watching the rain streak the windows, his face tight with a fear that had aged him years beyond 13. "The water took, Dad," he said, and his voice was so small, so fragile, that Sarah felt her heart break all over again. "What if it takes you? What if it takes me?" "It won't," Sarah said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. "I won't let it." "You can't control the water, Mom." He was right, she couldn't. But outside, in the storm, in the pasture now flooded and dangerous, Sentinel stood at the fence line, facing the rising water with a kind of steady presence that seemed to defy the chaos. That was the night that would become legendary in their family, though none of them would fully understand it until much later. That was the night that the horse's purpose became undeniable. That was the moment when everything was about to change. The flash flood warning came through at 11 p.m. The meteorologist on the emergency broadcast said it with a kind of calm urgency that made Sarah's blood run cold. An unusual convergence of weather systems. Rapid water accumulation in the creek basin. Property near waterways should prepare for rapid inundation. The river could overrun its banks within hours. Sarah called Michael to check if James should go to him, to higher ground, to safety. But Michael's property flooded first in these situations. It was actually lower than theirs. They were safer to stay. She packed a bag anyway. Documents. Photos. Things that mattered, just in case. She made James help her, and they worked silently, moving with a kind of numb efficiency. The rain kept falling. The wind kept rising. The world outside was becoming something unrecognizable. Around midnight, James suddenly asked about Sentinel. "We can't leave him," he said, and there was a firmness in his voice that Sarah hadn't heard in months. "We have to bring him in. We have to get him somewhere safe." Sarah wanted to say no. The weather was deteriorating. It wasn't safe for them to be outside. But she saw her son's face, and she understood that this wasn't negotiable for him. This was where his healing had led him, to the capacity to care about another creature's survival, to feel something urgent and important beyond his own fear. "Okay," she said. "We'll bring him in." The rain was horizontal when they made it outside. The wind tried to knock Sarah off her feet. The water was already ankle-deep in the pasture, and it was moving with purpose, flowing down from the higher ground and toward the creek. James ran to Sentinel, and Sarah saw something in that moment that she'd never seen before. The horse turned toward the boy deliberately, and he came to him without hesitation. All the skittishness, all the protective distance, all the careful boundaries dissolved in the face of real danger. James grabbed the horse's mane, and Sarah got the halter on, and together they tried to move Sentinel toward the house. That's when the wall of water came. It happened faster than Sarah had time to process. One moment they were moving forward, and the next. A surge of creek water, swollen beyond its normal capacity by the unrelenting rain, burst through the weak point in their fence line and rushed across the property with a roar that sounded like hunger. Sarah was thrown backward by the force of it. She felt herself go down, felt the water grab her, pull her, try to orient her in a direction she couldn't control. But Sentinel didn't panic. The horse reared. A massive, powerful movement, and his body became a barrier between the rushing water and where James had been standing. And then, with a kind of intelligence that defied everything Sarah thought she knew about animal behavior, Sentinel turned and did something that had probably saved his life in that barn fire years ago. He ran toward the threat. Not away from the water, but toward it. With James clinging to his mane, the horse charged directly at the surge. The cold water hit them both, but Sentinel's hooves found purchase on the slippery ground, and his powerful body cut through the current, pulling James up and forward, away from the riverbank, away from where the water was trying to drag him. Sarah, gasping and choking, was still in the water, still being pulled, and Sentinel, with James somehow still gripping his mane, turned back. The horse waded back into the current, and James, soaking and shaking, extended his hand toward his mother. Sarah reached. Their fingers found each other, and Sentinel pulled them both, mother and son, back toward solid ground, back toward safety, back toward life. They collapsed in the yard, all three of them, while the water continued to rage around them. Sarah held James against her, and the horse stood over them both, his body shielding them from the worst of the wind, his presence solid and real and absolutely undeniable. In the months after the flood receded, the town would tell the story differently. They'd say a horse saved a boy. They'd say it was instinct. They'd say it was luck. They'd say a lot of things that removed the magic from it, that tried to fit it into a framework that made sense. But Sarah knew the truth. She knew, with a certainty that didn't require proof, that Sentinel had been watching James, that he'd recognized in the boy something of himself, a creature trying to survive trauma, trying to find solid ground after drowning in grief, and that when the real water came, when the actual threat emerged, the horse's entire purpose crystallized into one moment of absolute clarity. Sentinel had been a guardian, not by chance, not by accident, by something deeper than logic. If you want to see everything finally come together, type YES in the comments. The aftermath was quiet in a way that the chaos hadn't been. The water receded over 3 days. The damage was extensive, but not catastrophic. The fence was destroyed. The pasture was covered in debris, but the house stood. Other properties in town weren't as fortunate. 3 houses evacuated. 2 families temporarily displaced. The creek, which had been an afterthought in most people's minds until that night, became the central character in every conversation, and the horse became a legend. The story of how Sentinel had protected James and Sarah from the flood spread through town with the speed of truth that people desperately want to believe. It reached the newspaper. It reached the local news. Reporters came and tried to interview Sarah, but she kept her answers brief. Yes, the horse had been extraordinary. Yes, James had been safe because of him. No, she couldn't explain exactly how it had worked. What surprised everyone was how Michael reacted. Sarah had expected continued skepticism. She'd expected more implied warnings, more concern, trolling masked as care. Instead, Michael came to the house a week after the flood, and he came alone. He stood in front of Sentinel for a long time without speaking, and then he turned to Sarah with an expression she'd never seen on his face before. "I was wrong," he said simply. "About all of it. About you. About what you were doing here. Your husband. He always trusted his instincts. About people. About what mattered. I'd forgotten that about him. You haven't." It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't the acknowledgement Sarah had wanted 5 years ago. But it was something. It was Michael finally seeing her, not as a widow who needed management, not as a single mother who needed guidance, but as a person who had loved Thomas and was honoring that love by saving their son in exactly the way Thomas would have wanted. Derek stopped by too, officially this time, with a commendation for animal heroism that was issued by the county sheriff's office. It was a ridiculous certificate, really, printed on cardstock with a decorative border. But Sarah framed it anyway and hung it in the kitchen, and she let James see that the world could acknowledge what his horse had done. The equine therapist called to check in, and she told Sarah something that settled something in her chest. What happened wasn't just luck. Horses remember rescue. Horses that have been saved respond to people who need saving. It's not magical thinking, it's neurological. The bond he formed with James gave him a reason to survive in a new way. And when the moment came, all of that bonded intention manifested into action. Your son didn't just rescue a horse. That horse rescued your son. They rescued each other. Winter came, and Sarah prepared the pasture for the cold months ahead. She invested money they didn't quite have in a proper shelter. She hired someone to repair the fencing. She started taking riding lessons herself from a local trainer so she could eventually help James progress if he wanted to. She was building something permanent, something real. By December, James was riding Sentinel. Not aggressively, not with confidence that bordered on recklessness, but calmly, carefully, with a presence that suggested he understood they were teaching each other about trust. And the most remarkable thing was that he'd started volunteering at Miller's rescue property on weekends. If this moment stayed with you, comment. Remember below. 7 years passed. James was 20 now, and he moved through the world with a kind of gentle assurance that came from having survived something and learned who he was in the surviving. He was studying animal behavior in college, with a focus on equine trauma and recovery. He was talking about starting a therapeutic riding program, specifically for kids who'd experienced loss. He was talking about bringing other horses like Sentinel to families that needed what his horse had given him. He was alive, not just breathing, but alive, present, and purposeful in moving forward. Sentinel was old now, 19 years old, which is ancient for a horse. His remaining eye had clouded a bit with age. His movement was slower, more deliberate, but he still came when James called. He still tolerated the careful grooming, the slow walks around the property, the quiet presence of the boy now man who'd learned how to live again by learning to care for him. On a fall morning, sitting on the fence rail beside Sentinel, James told his mother something she would never forget. "I'm not scared of water anymore," he said. "I can swim now. I can stand near the creek without feeling like it's trying to pull me under. And I think I'm ready to forgive what happened to Dad. Not forget it, but forgive it. And forgive myself for surviving when he didn't." Sarah cried then, the kind of tears that come after years of holding them back. She cried because her son had come through. She cried because a broken horse had somehow known exactly what a broken boy needed. She cried because love, in all its forms, is the most powerful force in the world. When Sentinel finally passed, it was peacefully, on a spring morning with the birds singing and the world moving into new growth. He was in his stall, and James was there with him, and the horse simply laid down and stopped breathing. 26 years old. A long life for a horse. A life that had been broken, and then healed, and then dedicated to healing others. The town came to the funeral. That's what everyone called it, a funeral. Not a burial, a funeral. The vet was respectful. They buried Sentinel at the edge of the property where he could see the house. And people who didn't even know the horse showed up to pay respects because they'd heard the story. They'd been changed by the story. They'd learned something about second chances and hidden strength from hearing what a horse had done. James scattered his father's ashes at that same spot, something he'd been waiting to do until he was ready. And with that gesture, something in the family story came full circle. The river had taken his father. The river had almost taken him. But a horse, a creature that had been thrown away, broken, deemed worthless, had given him back his life. Sarah became a volunteer at Miller's rescue property, and then she became its director when Miller finally retired. She started the therapeutic riding program that James had dreamed about. Every year, they bring horses, broken horses, traumatized horses, horses that the world had given up on, together with children and families that are drowning in their own ways. And what they've discovered, over and over again, is that rescue is always a two-way street. The horse doesn't just save the child saves the horse. The family saves themselves. Strength finds strength, and both are changed. This wasn't just a story about a horse. It was a reminder that what the world throws away often carries the greatest strength. That grief, unbearable as it is, can be transformed into purpose. That second chances aren't just about the animals we save. They're about what we save in ourselves when we choose to love something broken back into wholeness. Sentinel is gone, but his legacy continues in every child who learns that they're not alone in their pain. Every horse that gets saved because of the program James started. Every family that learns that healing doesn't have to look like the normal version of recovery. If this story moved you, please hit like. Tell us in the comments which moment stayed with you the longest. Was it the moment James first touched Sentinel? Was it the wall of water and the horse's impossible choice? Was it the years of quiet recovery that followed? And subscribe, because these stories of second chances and hidden strength are far from over. The world has so many broken things that are just waiting for someone brave enough to see their potential, waiting for someone willing to love them back to life. Thank you for listening.